What happens when you humiliate the wrong woman at work and her husband owns the company? This isn't just a story about revenge. It's a masterclass in how one woman turned humiliation into a $150 million movement that changed corporate America forever. Stay to the end. You'll never see power the same way again. Now pause for a second. Imagine that's you. You've spent months working harder than anyone. You're the only black woman in the room. And then, one joke, one Coke can. And suddenly, your dignity is on the floor, soaking through your work like it means nothing. But here's the twist. What if you weren't just another analyst? What if your silence wasn't weakness, but precision? They poured Coca-Cola on a black woman at work, but they didn't know her husband was a billionaire. And that mistake, it cost them everything. It happened on a quiet Friday before Labor Day, one of those days where half the office is empty and the rest pretend to work while watching the clock. Ava Morgan Sinclair stood by her desk, navy blue blouse neatly pressed, reports stacked perfectly for the upcoming investor meeting. She'd worked on them for weeks. But now they were soaked in Coca-Cola. The sticky brown soda dripped from her curls, trailing down her face, across her collarbone, and into the folds of her blouse. It was humiliating. But that wasn't the worst part. Brielle Davenport, the blonde, Gucci-wearing manager with a penchant for cruelty, burst out laughing. She dropped the empty Coke can onto Ava's desk like a trophy. "Oops," Brielle said, smirking. "Thought your stale ideas could use a little refreshment." The whole office turned to look. No one said a word. From behind Brielle, Chase Halbrook, an account coordinator with a taste for TikTok drama, held up his iPhone 15, filming. "Look, everyone," he shouted. "The diversity hire is getting a Coke shower." He laughed, hard, like it was the best punchline he'd ever delivered. And standing next to him, Lena Park, the HR assistant of all people, didn't say a word to stop him. Instead, she tapped away at her phone, her face lit up with amusement. "When you hire based on quotas, not talent," Lena muttered, adding a hashtag, #RealityCheck. Ava stood frozen, her fingers still gently resting on the edge of her presentation. Her curls clung to her forehead, her blouse clung to her chest, and the soda pooled beneath her notes. She didn't speak. She didn't cry, but her silence was a language no one in that office understood. At 29, Ava was the only black analyst in the entire company, a sea of button-downs, privilege, and polished Ivy League smiles. She'd been here 6 months, and from day one, she'd been an outsider. No one had hidden it. Brielle sauntered closer, her perfume mixing with the sugary scent of soda. "You know what your problem is, Ava?" she said, voice low, eyes sharp. "You don't know your place." She leaned in. "You think just because you've got some cheap public college degree, you belong at the table with us." From the glass-walled conference room, other employees stared, some awkward, most silent. The office, already half empty from early holiday escapes, felt like a stage where Ava was being humiliated, and no one, not one, stepped in. Ava finally moved, slowly. She reached for her phone. "Aw, look," Chase chuckled, zooming in. "Gonna call your mommy? Or your Uber boyfriend?" He snorted. "What is he? From the Bronx? Rode the subway here, right?" Lena giggled. "Come on, Chase, that's mean. But I mean, facts." Ava didn't respond. She typed one line into her phone. A single message. Brielle narrowed her eyes. "What are you doing?" "You just made the best decision of your lives," Ava said, barely above a whisper. Brielle blinked. "What? Did the sugar go to your brain?" Ava glanced at the time. 3:32 p.m. Exactly 15 minutes left. That's when Chase paused his filming. "Wait, what's in 15 minutes? Ava said nothing, just stared ahead, unbothered, collected. And that calmness, was the first sign that something was off. Because while Chase and Brielle mocked her, while Lena tweeted like a teenager in a drama club, Ava had never raised her voice, never begged, never even blinked. That calm, that wasn't defeat. That was strategy. Then, the private elevator dinged. It was a soft sound, but in that moment it hit like a bomb. Everyone turned. Because that elevator? It was never used. It was reserved for board members, C-suite executives, people whose names were on the building. 3 security guards stepped out first, clean-cut, stone-faced, clearly not there for office pizza. And behind them, a tall, broad-shouldered man in a sleek Tom Ford suit, flanked by silence and authority. Elias Grant Sinclair. His shoes alone probably cost more than Chase's rent. His watch? A Patek Philippe. Subtle, silent, serious wealth. "Aves," he said, voice low, but slicing through the tension like a scalpel. "Are you okay?" The entire room froze. Brielle's smile twitched. Lena stopped typing. Chase lowered his phone. Because everyone knew that name. Elias Sinclair, chairman and CEO of Sterling Enterprises. Net worth, $7.8 billion. And he had just walked into their office, calling her by a nickname. Ava turned, met his gaze, and nodded. "I'm fine, Eli." Brielle's mouth opened, but nothing came out. "Chase?" His phone slipped right out of his hand and cracked on the marble. Lena, already checking LinkedIn. Elias looked around. His expression changed, from concern to quiet, simmering fury. He turned to the security team. "Escort these 3 out, now." Brielle stepped forward, voice shaky with confusion. "Excuse me, who are you to come into our office and—" "No," Elias said sharply, stepping beside Ava. "This is my office." He glanced around. Sterling Enterprises is the majority shareholder of Apex Marketing. Effective immediately, these individuals are no longer employed here. The silence was deafening, and as Brielle's eyes flicked between Elias, the guards, and Ava, reality hit her like a freight train. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't office drama. This was the fall of 3 people who mistook power for cruelty. Ava finally spoke. Her voice was soft, but every word landed like a hammer. "You judged me for where I'm from, because I didn't talk like you, didn't dress like you, didn't have your pedigree." She wiped her face gently with a tissue. "You never once stopped to ask who I really am." And now, it was too late. Everyone in the office stood frozen as Elias Sinclair turned toward the HR desk. "Lena Park, you're done," he said flatly. Lena blinked, lips trembling. I have bills. A family." "So do I," Ava replied, folding her arms. "My mother's a nurse. My father drove a bus for 40 years. You think that makes me less than you?" She shook her head gently. "That's the problem. You looked at me and all you saw was your stereotype." What they didn't know, what none of them had known, was that Ava had been documenting every word, every whisper, every insult for 6 straight months. She'd saved the screenshots, recorded the meetings, printed out the snide emails, security footage too. Every time her ideas were stolen in a meeting or she was passed over for credit. It was all neatly cataloged and backed up in the cloud, waiting for this moment. While Chase was busy making memes about her, Ava had been building a case, quietly, deliberately. And now, it was time to open the file. Elias motioned to the elevator. Another man stepped out, calm, sharp, gray suit, glasses, briefcase in hand. Julian Park, Sterling Enterprises lead attorney, and Ava's best friend since college. He didn't waste time. "I have here," he said, holding out crisp folders, "documented evidence of racial discrimination, workplace harassment, and creation of a hostile work environment." He handed one folder to Brielle, one to Chase, one to Lena. Brielle snorted. "You're kidding. We were just joking around. She never even complained." Elias picked Chase's dropped iPhone off the ground and hit play. The room filled with Chase's voice, crystal clear. "Look, it's the diversity hire getting a Coke shower." Then, "Better boyfriend took the subway from the Bronx." Lena winced. The recording left no room for denial. "You filmed yourself," Elias said coldly, "harassing my wife and thought it was funny. Now it's evidence." Brielle stepped back. Wife? Ava finally smiled. Oh, we didn't get to that part? She held up her hand. The discreet platinum ring on her finger gleamed. It had always been there, they just never noticed. Brielle stammered. Why were you working here? Because I believe in earning my place, Ava said. I didn't want a shortcut. I didn't want the Sinclair name opening doors I hadn't earned. I wanted to see what it felt like to start at the bottom. She looked around. And what I saw was how ugly people get when they think they're untouchable. She walked back to her desk, picked up her soaked reports, and slid them into her laptop bag. But let's be clear, she added. I never stopped being 10 steps ahead of you. Now imagine this. You've been humiliated, mocked, undermined for months. No one defended you. No one believed in you. And in that moment, with coke dripping from your blouse and silence ringing in your ears, they thought they broke you. But what if you were the one holding the detonator all along? What if every insult was evidence, every whisper a nail in their coffin, and every day you stayed silent wasn't surrender, but strategy? Because this isn't just a clapback. This is a reckoning. And it's only getting started. Because while Brielle and Chase were laughing at her hair or her blouse or her salary, Ava was building something far more valuable. A system. A tool. An entire predictive algorithm that had the potential to change the way marketing was done across every Fortune 500 company. And it was all hers. Ava turned back to the trio. You thought I was weak because I was quiet, she said. You confused dignity with submission. Big mistake, Julian added. One that's going to cost you. He opened his briefcase again. This, he said, lifting out a patent registration form, is Project Prometheus. Brielle squinted. What's that? It's a proprietary marketing analysis system developed solely by Ava Morgan Sinclair, Julian said. Estimated market value, $47 million. Chase's mouth dropped. You're joking. She's not, Elias said. We've already purchased the exclusive rights. The project is being integrated into Sterling Enterprises' global strategy. He paused. And the royalties will go to the Ava Morgan Fund, which, as of today, is launching a scholarship program for Black youth in tech. Brielle laughed. But it wasn't real. It was hollow, cracked. This is insane, she whispered. You can't just... Yes, Elias said. We can. He turned to security. You have 30 minutes to clear your desks. Any attempt at retaliation will result in immediate legal action. Lena whispered, This can't be legal. Julian raised an eyebrow. What's illegal is what you did, and unlike you, we have proof. Brielle spun around, desperate now, looking at the few employees still in the office. Are you all just going to stand there? You know what she's like. You've seen it. Miles Carter, the quiet IT guy, stepped forward. He looked right at Ava. Actually, he said, we've all seen what you're like. He turned to Brielle. You made this place toxic. Ava made it better, even while you treated her like dirt. Brielle's mouth opened, then closed. She had nothing left. Ava packed the last of her things and turned toward Brielle one final time. You know what's funny? She said, voice soft, razor sharp. I was going to resign today. I had the letter printed and everything. She zipped her laptop case. But now, you just gave me something better. She slipped her phone into her pocket. The time was 3:47 p.m. In exactly 13 minutes, every employee at Apex Marketing would receive a company-wide memo outlining a new diversity and inclusion initiative. Drafted by Ava, approved by Elias, and funded by the liquidation of Brielle, Chase, and Lena's shares in the company. Ava turned to Elias and touched his arm. I want to do something with this, bigger than just payback. He nodded, understanding her instantly. The scholarship fund? Exactly. 4 full-ride scholarships in year 1 for brilliant young Black students in technology, paid for with the money these 3 would have used for bonuses, vacations, and fancy condos. They thought I was weak, Ava said quietly, but they never saw the strength it takes to wait, to watch, to rise above. And that's exactly what she did. The silence in the office was sharp enough to cut through glass. Security moved in, firm but professional, giving Brielle, Chase, and Lena just enough time to gather their things under the eyes of their stunned coworkers. But honestly, there wasn't much to pack. Just a few broken egos and the realization that they had just ruined their own lives. Meanwhile, down on the 10th floor, the main auditorium lights dimmed. An emergency all-staff meeting had just been called. No one knew what to expect. But when Julian Park stepped onto the stage and connected his laptop to the main screen, everyone understood this wasn't just any meeting. The screen flashed to life. Evidence of hostile environment, Sinclair versus Apex Marketing. The title alone sent a wave of murmurs through the crowd. Brielle, in a last-ditch effort, burst through the back of the auditorium, rushing toward the projector. "You can't show this," she shrieked. "It's a violation of privacy." Julian didn't flinch. "Invasion of privacy?" he repeated, calm and cutting. "Like this?" He clicked to the next slide. A screenshot of one of Brielle's internal emails lit up the screen. "The new diversity arrived today. I give her 3 weeks before she quits or goes back to the ghetto. Anyone want to place bets?" The room gasped. Brielle froze mid-step, her face pale. Another click, another screenshot. A private WhatsApp group called Elite Apex. Chase had posted a candid photo of Ava getting coffee. "Someone call her Uber. I think the maid's lost." Then Lena's Instagram post popped up. A secret video of Ava eating alone in the lunchroom. Caption: "When the quota hire has no friends. #reality." Gasps turned into dead silence. Ava stepped out onto the stage. No introduction, no apology, no need. She just walked to the center of the room, looked out at the same people who had watched her be humiliated, and spoke. "For 6 months," she said, "you watched this happen. You heard the comments. Some of you laughed, some stayed quiet, but almost no one said a word." Her voice didn't shake. "And while you were ignoring it, I was collecting it. Every email, every DM, every video." She paused. "Because I knew this day would come. Now stop and picture this. 6 months ago, they laughed while you sat alone. They whispered behind your back, copied your work, and made sure you never felt safe. And you never screamed, never fought. You just stayed, watching, waiting, building, until this moment, because what they thought was weakness was just silence sharpening into strategy. And now, you've got the mic, the evidence, and the entire company watching. So ask yourself, if this was you, what would you do? Would you burn it all down? Or build something that makes sure no one ever goes through what you did, ever again?" The next slide flashed up. It was a diagram, Project Prometheus, by Ava Morgan Sinclair. Market value, $47 million. Patent status, approved. Whispers spread across the auditorium. Ava continued. "While they mocked my voice, I built something that could change the future of marketing. An AI-driven analysis system that predicts campaign trends with 47% greater accuracy than current models." Another slide. Ownership, 100%. Ava Morgan Fund. And then, for the first time since the incident, she smiled. Sterling Enterprises acquired the rights last week. All proceeds go to a new initiative to fund full scholarships for Black youth in technology. Elias stood from the front row, adding, starting with the money recovered from the sale of Brielle, Chase, and Lena's shares. Chase, now seated in the back, stood up and shouted, "This is extortion! You can't do this!" Julian adjusted his glasses. "Extortion is threatening someone to gain something. What we've done is present evidence. Evidence of documented racial discrimination, harassment, and hostile work culture, all of which are crimes in the state of New York." A new slide appeared. Organizational chart. Apex Marketing. 3 names in red. Brielle Davenport, Chase Halbrook, Lena Park. Status, immediate termination. With cause. Brielle screamed, "This isn't legal. You can't fire us with cause." Elias responded calmly, "We're not firing you because of an opinion. We're firing you for what you did, and for what you recorded yourselves doing." Then he pressed play. The video Chase had filmed earlier played on the giant screen for everyone to see. "Oops," Brielle's voice rang out, followed by Chase's. "The diversity hire's getting a Coke shower." Then the Bronx comments. The laughter. You could hear a pin drop in the auditorium. Even the employees who had once snickered along now sat frozen, too ashamed to make eye contact. Then came the final blow. Elias stepped forward. As of today, Sterling Enterprises will be launching a compliance initiative across all its subsidiaries. Any partner company that wants to maintain contracts with us will undergo diversity audits and ethical reviews. He turned to the crowd. This is not just about punishment, it's about change. Lena, sobbing now, gasped, "But my career, it's all gone. My reputation." Ava looked at her, expression unreadable. "You spent 6 months trying to destroy mine, sabotaged my projects, laughed while I was humiliated. And now, you're learning that cruelty has consequences." Brielle clung to the edge of a chair, her voice breaking. "Please, I have a mortgage." Ava's voice was calm, devastating in its stillness. "And I had student loans, and rent, and self-doubt, every day wondering if I belonged here. But I still showed up, still did the work. And you used your power to crush people like me." She turned to the audience. "But I turned that pain into something better, something that can build others up." A final slide appeared. The Ava Morgan Fund for Black Youth in Tech. Initial commitment, $50 million. Goal, 1,000 full scholarships in 5 years. Gasps again. Chase whispered to himself, "50 million? Where did that come from?" Ava answered aloud, as if she'd heard him. "From your fines, from the reversal of your bonuses, and from my personal donation." She paused. Then, with quiet finality, "Oh, and every company you ever apply to from now on will receive a full report on why you were let go, with evidence." Brielle collapsed into a seat, sobbing. "I lost everything over a joke." Ava shook her head. "No," she said. "You lost everything because of who you chose to be, over and over again." Security approached to escort them out, and as they passed Ava, she looked directly at Brielle. "You want sympathy now, but when I was eating lunch alone, you gave me hashtags. When I worked late to cover your mistakes, you gave me silence. And when you poured Coke on me, you gave me a reason." She held up her Patek watch, a wedding gift from Elias. It read 4:05 p.m. And in that moment, Ava Morgan Sinclair was no longer just a quiet analyst in a blue blouse. She was a force, a movement, a reckoning, and the game had just begun. 6 months later, the auditorium at the Metropolitan Opera House in Manhattan was filled to capacity. Not for a performance, not for a gala, but for the premiere of a documentary that had already started a cultural firestorm. Code Ava: How Corporate Racism Sparked a Revolution. On stage stood Ava Morgan Sinclair. She wore a tailored black Armani suit, not because she had to impress anyone, but because now she chose what to wear. No judgment, no labels, just presence. The crowd rose to their feet. Fortune 500 CEOs, civil rights leaders, Ivy League deans, but most importantly, the first recipients of the Ava Morgan Fund, brilliant young black students who had grown up believing people like them didn't belong in tech. Now, they were enrolled at MIT, Stanford, and Harvard. Ava stepped up to the microphone. "When they poured Coca-Cola on me," she began, her voice echoing through the hall, "they thought they were embarrassing me. What they didn't know was they were watering the seed of something unstoppable." The applause thundered. The documentary had already caused ripples before its release. Interviews, leaks, social media buzz. But no one was prepared for what was revealed during the screening. One segment shocked everyone. Brielle Davenport had tried to sue Ava for defamation and emotional distress, but her own legal team dropped the case after reviewing the evidence. Internal emails, screenshots, recordings. They knew there was no winning that fight. Chase Halbrook? After being rejected for more than 20 job applications, he was now working as a delivery app driver. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The very job he once used as a punchline had become his reality. Lena Park had moved to a small rural town, shut down all her social media accounts, and, according to former colleagues, spent her days writing letters of apology that were never answered. Meanwhile, Ava had kept moving forward. She'd created Equihire, a groundbreaking AI tool that detects patterns of bias and discrimination in hiring practices. It used everything she'd endured, every email, every hashtag, every glance, and turned it into a system that could see injustice before it escalated. The app had been adopted by over 200 companies in its first 3 months. It generated $180 million in revenue in Q1 alone. Ava donated every cent to expand the scholarship fund. Apple, Microsoft, and Google formed a historic alliance to implement Equihire in their global hiring pipelines, a move hailed by Time magazine as the most significant advancement in corporate accountability since #MeToo. And standing quietly off stage, watching it all unfold, was Miles Carter, the IT colleague who had been one of the only people to stand up for Ava on that fateful day. He was now the CTO of the new Sterling Tech Equity Division. He spoke to the New York Times before the event. Ava taught me that silence in the face of injustice is injustice, and she showed the world what happens when we stop tolerating it. But the most emotional moment of the evening didn't come from the CEOs or tech founders. It came from a man in a simple gray suit, with thick hands and tired eyes. Marcus Sinclair, Ava's father. He took the stage, holding the Nobel Peace Prize his daughter had just received, the first time the award had ever been given for innovation in social justice tech. "My daughter has always been brilliant," he said, choking up. "But people only saw her color. They didn't see her fire. Now the whole world sees her." The auditorium stood as one, and on the massive screen behind him, images of the old Apex marketing office faded in. But it wasn't Apex anymore. That company? Gone. Bankrupted. All contracts pulled by Sterling Enterprises and every one of its partners. The building had been sold and repurposed. Now it was called the Ava Morgan Sinclair Institute for Technological Equity. Inside, young black and brown students were learning how to build tools to prevent what Ava had experienced. A new generation of coders, data scientists, engineers of justice. But the backlash hadn't disappeared. It had simply taken new forms. Brielle Davenport, desperate for redemption, appeared on a little-known podcast where she sobbed into the mic. "I lost everything over a joke," she said. The clip went viral, not with sympathy, but with brutal clarity. The top comment said it all. "You didn't lose everything over a joke. You lost everything because you thought cruelty was harmless." Underneath it, another. "When you make someone else's existence your punchline, don't be surprised when they write the ending." And yet, Ava didn't gloat. She didn't seek applause. Her victory was never about revenge. That's why, as she stood once again under the stage lights, she ended her speech with words that would go viral, not just online, but in history books. "They keep asking if what I did was revenge, but revenge destroys. What I built is justice." She paused, locking eyes with the young women in the front row. Future engineers, founders, leaders. Justice builds, it lifts, it multiplies. I turned every drop of that Coke into fuel. Because this wasn't just about punishing the guilty, it was about making sure that no one else, no girl, sitting in a quiet cubicle, wondering if she belonged, would have to go through what Ava did. Just as she stepped off stage, her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. It read, "Miss Sinclair, I just got accepted into your scholarship program. I'm the first person in my family to go to college. Thank you for not giving up that day." Ava smiled, remembering the moment she'd typed a single sentence into her phone, with soda still dripping down her curls. "You just made the best decision of your lives." And she had been right. They did. Just not in the way they thought. A year after that Friday afternoon on the 42nd floor, the name Ava Morgan Sinclair wasn't just trending anymore. It was being studied. The Ava effect. That's what professors, analysts, and journalists were now calling it. It became a formal case study in over 100 universities, from Yale to Howard, taught in courses on organizational behavior, ethics, AI, and racial justice. And it all started because 3 people thought it was funny to humiliate a black woman at work. They never saw the storm they were unleashing. Brielle Davenport, once a rising star in the Manhattan marketing world, had vanished from LinkedIn and resurfaced in the comments section of think pieces trying to defend herself. Her last public statement: "It was just a joke. People are too sensitive these days." But the world had changed. No one was laughing. Chase Halbrook, now making deliveries across the city on his scooter, became a cautionary tale. Be careful what you post didn't just apply to celebrities anymore. It applied to bullies with smartphones, too. And Lena Park? She quietly moved out of state, far from the high-rise buildings and networking brunches. According to a former colleague, she now spends her days offline, writing, regretting, reflecting. But this story was never really about them. This story was about a woman who had every reason to leave and chose to stay, who had every right to explode, and instead built. A woman who understood something most people miss. Revenge is short-term, but justice echoes. In her final on-camera interview for the documentary, Ava sat by the window of her new office, not in a skyscraper, but in a sunlit building that used to be Apex Marketing. Now, the Ava Sinclair Institute was filled with young talent, the very kind of people Brielle used to joke about. A crew member asked her, "Do you ever wish you'd walked out that day instead of standing up to them?" She smiled. "Walking away would have been easier," she said. "But the truth is, I didn't want to just escape. I wanted to build a door big enough so no one else like me would have to beg for a seat at the table ever again." The camera caught her glancing toward a wall of framed photos. Each one showed a young scholar, some still in high school, others now working at companies that used to reject people like them. "Every time I get a message from one of our scholarship recipients," Ava continued, "I'm reminded why it mattered." One message in particular stood out. It was from a girl in Detroit, age 17. It read, "I saw your video. I showed it to my mom. She cried. We both cried. I want to be like you. I want to build things that change lives. Thank you for showing me it's possible." Those words hit harder than any viral moment ever could, because Ava's real victory wasn't in the headlines or the tech deals or the Nobel Prize. It was in knowing that for every girl who had once felt invisible, there was now a map, a blueprint, a precedent. And behind that, a woman who refused to break. Instead, she recalibrated the system. Sterling Enterprises expanded the Equihire platform globally, making it mandatory for every one of its partner companies, over 3,000 by that point, to undergo annual audits. And the Ava Morgan Fund? It had grown to over $150 million in pledged funding from tech giants, foundations, and everyday people who saw themselves in her story. Ava's closing words at the annual Equity and Innovation Conference summed it all up. She stood at the podium, no notes, no script, just truth. Sometimes the world tries to define you by where you're from, how you look, how quietly you sit in a room full of people who think they're smarter than you. She paused, her voice steady. "But I've learned that power isn't in titles. It's in patience. It's in proof. It's in knowing that even when no one else believes in you, you believe in you." She looked out at the packed hall, hundreds of students, engineers, dreamers, most of them women, most of them black and brown. And if you've ever felt like your voice didn't matter, let me be clear, it does. Because the loudest voice in the room isn't the one that shouts. It's the one that changes the room completely. Thunderous applause. Later that night, as she walked back through the Institute's quiet hallway, she stopped by a glass panel etched with the Institute's mission. True diversity isn't about quotas. It's about access. It's about dignity. It's about talent having the freedom to shine, regardless of skin, zip code, or surname. Ava traced the words gently with her finger. In the lobby, a small statue had been erected in her honor, but she'd insisted the plaque read something simple: "For those who choose justice over revenge and build something better." As she stepped into the night, her phone buzzed again. Another message, another story beginning. This one was from a boy in Atlanta. "My teacher made us watch your story. I want to make an app like you did. I used to think people like me couldn't do stuff like that. Now I know we can. Thank you, Miss Ava. Ava smiled, slipped the phone in her pocket, and looked up at the New York skyline. 1 year ago, she was dripping in coke and shame. Today, she was drenched in purpose. If this story moved you, drop a comment. Have you ever turned adversity into action? Subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Stories where justice isn't just an idea, it's a revolution. And remember, the world doesn't change when people get what they deserve. It changes when someone brave enough decides to break the cycle. Be that someone.